I'm not cut out for this. Because
Yeah.
it's like I got distracted by like, it's not like I wasn't shooting. I was shooting, but I was like, oh, this is interesting over here. This looks cool. And so I'm shooting something else. And then somebody's like, they're cutting the cake. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like running over to try to get it.
Well, cutting cake is pretty non-exciting anyway. Who cares about the cake?
It's so boring.
I mean,
well, except to the people who are going to watch the video later. Welcome to the Film Riot podcast. Today we have another frequent collaborator of mine, which is Daniel Routh. He was the cinematographer of Sentinel and our other short, Westworld to Yuma. He also just completed his first feature film as the cinematographer, so we're going to be talking a lot about that. But before we get into that, I want to thank our sponsor, which is Westcott. Westcott makes really great gear like the Ice Light 2 and the Flex Lights. They're the originators of the flexible LED system. They just make really great, solid gear that you can count on for durability and portability and really high-end results. If you want to find out more about their gear and see some videos of us reviewing them from Film Riot, jump over to the episode page for this episode. But now I'm going to shut up and get into it with Daniel. Let's start at the beginning. I'm curious how you got into I mean, I know, but let's tell people, how did you get into this? Because you didn't go to film school, right?
I did not go to film school, yes. To college for music composition, actually. And barely got into music school. Barely got in after a year of auditions, and I was just a terrible instrumentalist, but I knew I wanted to write music. So I was really passionate about that and wrote a lot. And by the end of school, I was doing really well. I'd won a big competition in the school for a piece for symphony I'd written, and I got a public performance. And about a few days before the public performance, I had the realization that I didn't want to do music anymore as a profession.
Man, was that scary? Like that total 180?
It was really scary. It was a moment where...
Because that level of music, that's a lot of commitment that you're putting into that, and a lot of hours that you're putting into that.
Yeah, and it was a thing, too, where it's like, I mean, that competition was a big deal for me, and school-wide it was a big deal, because the school I went to is one of the better music schools in the country, and I had struggled so much to get in and to work my way up, and I was finally seeing success. I was finally seeing, like, the fruits of all my hard work, and I mean, I think there were 35 people in my freshman class in the composition department, and I was the only one left at the end.
Wow.
And I quit right after I graduated. So no one succeeded. But I think that it was just a thing where, I mean, there were several factors. One was I knew I wasn't going to make any money. And I knew I wanted to make money because I had met a girl who's now my wife, wanted to marry her.
Mm-hmm. Have the babies eventually.
Exactly. And
right.
I looked at my peers who were writing and performing piano concertos for like the Czech Philharmonic. This is a friend of mine, and I just thought, I'm never going to be there. And if I know I could get there if I wanted to, but I would have to work so much harder for so much longer, and I just don't think I want to be successful in that. So my good friend of mine, Ryan Pauly, who is now my business partner, he was shooting weddings. I went to college, and he started shooting weddings right out of high school. And he was making money and working for himself, and he was really successful and making cool things. And I thought, that sounds like fun. I had grown up making little short films and doing photography, and it had always been a passion of mine, but I'd never considered it as a career.
Right.
I never thought I could make money doing this. People could
this is just a fun thing. This isn't a career.
Yeah. And why I thought music could be a career over something more useful. Not that music isn't useful, but something more useful like commercials or weddings or something more obvious, low-hanging fruit. I don't know why. I thought music would be more of a career choice than things like that, but I saw my friend Ryan. He was doing so well with it, so I asked him if I could just come help out for free on his next wedding, and he said yes. So I came, shot the wedding with my T3i and nifty 50 millimeter, and that kind of, actually no, I didn't even have the T3i at that point. I think I'd been saving for it, but shot the wedding, and I just really loved it. It was something really exciting for me. So
man, I did weddings for like a second. I couldn't do it. I found out I should not be allowed to shoot a wedding because I have the ADHDs, and that does not allow you to pay attention to very important moments. So I missed the cutting of the cake at one. And I missed half of like the father-daughter dance at another. Yeah. And I was like, I need to not do this. I'm not cut out for this. Because it's like I got distracted by like, it's not like I wasn't shooting. I was shooting, but I was like, oh, this is interesting over here. This looks cool. And so I'm shooting something else. And then somebody's like, they're cutting the cake. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like running over to try to get it.
Well, cutting cake is pretty non-exciting anyway. Who cares about the cake?
It's so boring. I mean, except to the people who are going to watch the video later.
I guess, yeah. But Yeah. So then after I did a few weddings with Ryan, started to make a little bit of money. I started doing my own thing, shooting weddings. And I had found a guy in Denver who was doing some really great weddings, and actually was able to connect with him. I went up to Denver, where I'm actually originally from, and he and I sat down and had coffee, and we talked for probably 3 or 4 hours and just really connected with him. And so I got started shooting weddings with him not long after that. And his stuff he was doing was like, I mean, for big celebrities, and you have to sign NDAs and travel the world. And I went to Bali to shoot a wedding. I went to north of London to shoot a wedding with him. And I really credit him with teaching me how to shoot. Really, I mean, I cut my teeth there. So I learned how to shoot. But not only that, I think I really started to understand the way light works through my experience with him.
Right.
And that was really...
Because it's kind of like doc shooting, really.
It is, yeah. And I mean, he was the first one that said, expose for the highlights. And it's something I always looked at his footage and thought, why does it look so much better than mine? And he said, expose for the highlights. And for me, for my taste, that was like, that's what I want. I want dark shadows. I am more attracted to those kinds of looks. And, use an ND, throw an ND on and take it off when you don't, and turn the lights off when you're in the room. And, different things where it's just like simple things where before I would just shoot whatever was given to me. And he taught me that you have to craft this thing, make it what you want. So I credit him with teaching me how to shoot, and then did weddings for about 1.5 years and really kind of started to feel the burnout.
Yeah, kind of hit the end of the road of what that could teach you pretty much.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that there was a time when I think I had 13 weddings that I had shot and already gotten paid for, and I had to edit. And I'd already spent the money that I made from those things. So it was like, this is tough. And I was a slow editor at the time. And so me and Ryan, back to my friend Ryan, we had moved in together with a couple other guys in a house. We had a spare room and we were working out of there, both editing our weddings and doing our own thing. And I think I threw out one day and just said, hey, we should start a commercial production company together. And he kind of looked at me and said, well, yeah, I don't think so. I want to do my own thing. I'm kind of a lone wolf. And I thought, okay, that's fine. And then a couple weeks later, he came back to me and said, you know what, man, actually, I think that's a good idea. And at that point, I'd already kind of reconsidered. I said, no, I think I'm just going to do my own thing. And
Take that, Paulie.
Yeah. And we had done a little passion project together, this short documentary with some friends of ours that do woodworking. And it was a couple months after that. This is right around the time we were talking about doing a commercial production company, an agency. We had a friend at an agency who had seen that project, and he contacted us and said, we want to hire you to go to Denver to shoot this thing for a client of ours, exactly what you did for this passion project, but for money. And they told us the budget, and we looked at each other and said,
we should start a production company together.
Exactly, yeah. So we did. And with no clue what that meant, no idea what that looked like. And for the first 6 months, we worked out of I'd gotten married and moved in with my wife. Well, of course, moved in with my wife. I still live,
but still separate
I still
beds,
lived with the
course.
guys. Yeah. I just commute to my house.
Yeah, she gets you Fridays through Sundays.
Exactly.
They get you Monday through Thursdays. Yeah,
like joint custody kind of thing. Yeah, my work wife and my wife.
Yeah, I'm working on getting Wednesdays and Thursdays, but we'll talk about that later.
So after about 6 months, we got an office together, which was super scary. I think it was like $250 a month or $400 a month, and we thought, how are we going to pay for that? That seems like crazy money. And we started getting work, and work didn't stop. It didn't stop coming. And for the first year, we didn't even have a website. We just were shooting so much and editing so much that we were so busy we didn't have time to make a website. And probably after about a year, we hired on a third person, our friend Grant, who's a producer for us, and he really helped us get organized. And because he came on, that sort of freed me up to really focus more on shooting, really being what a DP should be, and be focused on the visuals and not focused on some of the business stuff behind running a production company.
Right. The very not fun stuff.
The stuff that is fun for some people, but not for me
right.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's like, I don't mind doing that stuff if I don't have the other stuff to be doing, but I always have the other stuff to be doing. So it always like seeps in and starts to hurt the creativity, because it's pretty ongoing, like the create and to be creative. Like my wife gets it now, but she used to just think I wasn't working. But like couch time is a thing. I don't have an idea, so I'm going to go take an hour-long shower, and then I come out with a whole scene fixed. I'm like, I know what to do now. It's like just being able to like shut everything down and spend an entire day just thinking is really needed. So doing that stuff just like, it just hurts like the creative side of it.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, coming out of college, having left music, I didn't really understand what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to be in this industry, roughly. I knew I didn't want to do weddings. I knew I wanted to make cool stuff that I was proud of. And I knew that I'm a creative person because of my time in college and all that. And just growing up, I've always been that person. But I didn't really understand what that meant for me.
So was it like doing all the commercials and stuff? Is that what sort of, I mean, how did you fall into that? It's like, okay, the three of us are doing this together. My strength is visual, so I'll just handle this part. And then over time, it was like, oh, I'm a DP.
Yeah, kind of. It was funny because Ryan actually wanted to be a DP. And through our experience working together, I said, man, you're a director. Like, you're a writer-director.
At one point, I got discouraged about the directing deal in my like film school days. And I was like, maybe I'm just a DP, because everybody just kept saying how visual I was. Oh, you're so visual. You're so visual. I'm like, man, maybe I'm just because nobody's complimenting any directing side of me. It's just maybe this is it.
Yeah.
But then toward the end of the year, I'm like, nah.
Yeah, exactly. So I told Ryan, man, you're a director. You're a writer-director. He just saw the big picture where I didn't. And so he started doing that. I started shooting all of our stuff without really much of a thought given to that as a career choice. And really my focus was on running the company and trying to be, essentially I was our executive producer, and I was working as hard as I could to try to win new clients and to just try to get the company on its feet. At this point, we were still really new. But after probably 6 months of that, I just hated it. I hated that as my only responsibility. And I had stopped shooting at that point.
Oh, wow. So were you hiring DPs?
I don't know if we were at the point yet where we were
it.
hiring DPs.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I was more like client side, really schmoozing and trying to work with clients and make them happy. And I'd stepped away from the camera a bit, and I just hated it. I remember there was a shoot we did. It was a big shoot, a big opportunity we had for Pizza Hut, and it was like my first time sort of as the EP for our company, and with air quotes. And I was working with a gaffer and with the client, but I didn't touch the camera. I had nothing. It just was a weird, convoluted relationship that I had with the camera. I didn't feel like I could leave it, and I always wanted to have a piece of it. And then it was after Ghost House that we worked on. I worked as a camera PA for a day or two on Ghost House, and then I went over to the grip side and working with Ryan Booth, who was the DP on that. I think that for the first time, that was my first time on a real, like, proper set. And
man, that escalated quickly for you.
It did, yeah, because that would have been a little less than 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw, especially just Ryan's personality, I saw myself in him in a lot of ways, and that it's okay to be, he's very intentional, and he's very, I don't want to say serious, but he's really, really good at what he does.
He's very focused.
He's very focused.
And a perfectionist, which I appreciate.
Yes, and that's what I saw in him that I feel in me. And I felt like, oh, it's okay to be myself in a DP role. And I just saw really what a DP does on that, and thought, oh man, that's what I want to do. That's where I want to be. So I'd had the experience of shooting so much, but I'd never considered I should just be a DP.
Right.
And so from then on, I mean, I remember I thought about it for a couple of days, and then I went and I told Ryan and Grant, we were back at the office, and I said, I don't want to be our EP anymore. I just want a DP, and they were fully supportive. And so from then on, that's what I've really been focused on. And we still have the company, and I still do a lot to keep that afloat, but I've been hyper focused on just DPing.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
So Ghost House, you figured out, you saw Booth doing his thing. You're like, okay, that's what I want to do. I want a DP. That's the thing I've been looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So then after that, what was your next project? Because eventually we got to Sentinel that we did together.
Yeah.
But you had some before Sentinel, didn't you?
Yes, I did. After that, so that would have been in September of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I did a super short, we moved offices and our new place was empty, and so we shot something really stupid and quick in there. And then that was the extent of my experience until a friend of mine named Matthew Rojas, he was working on a short film that he kind of got funded and asked me to be a guest cinematographer, basically to shoot a couple of flashback scenes. And I was really excited for that. I thought, man, that sounds like a great opportunity. Of course, I would love to do that. And it was a couple weeks before we were supposed to shoot. It was part of this bigger story of there was this fight scene in the rain, and this woman who's sort of dealing with loss. She loses her baby, essentially. She is like confronted by this dark, mysterious figure, and they have this big fight scene in the rain, and it's really epic. And then she gets interviewed by some bureau that is investigating these mysterious beings. A few weeks before we were supposed to shoot that, he called me and said, "Hey, my DP just fell through, so you're up. Do you want to
upgrade?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He said, "So do you want to do this?" And I remember, I don't think we talked. I think we were texting. I remember texting him back, and I said, "Man, it's really okay if you want to pick somebody else. I'm okay with. My feelings won't be hurt if you want to go with somebody else. I've never done a short film before. I don't know if I'm ready for that." And he said, "Well, let me know." And I thought about it, and I'd remembered reading somewhere that if something scares you, then it's probably worth doing.
Yes, so very true.
That just, it stuck with me ever since I read that, and I thought, okay. So I texted her, I called him the next day and said, "Dude, I'm in. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm in. I'll try." And it ended up being I'm still proud of it. I blew myself away with what we did, or at least with my work in there. And the short itself is fantastic, but my work, I just did not know that I had that in me. I'd never done narrative before, and I didn't know that, wow, like I can create images like that. And that's possible for somebody like me with little experience and, just a camera and some people to help. It was really, I caught the bug there. And
it was probably just a factor of like, you did all these commercials and you saw all these things and you had been shooting for so long. And then it was like, finally you opened the doors on the thing. And then realized how much experience you actually had, just not focused in the way that you wanted to focus it. Yeah. So it was there, you just never let it out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I really agree with you need to be afraid of it. I think that's so important. Even the stuff that I've done, Sentinel, which we did together, I wasn't afraid of it at all. So I was like, you know what? I am not shot listing this. I'm not prepping this. I'm hardly scripting this. We're just going to go make it up as we go. To your dismay a little bit, I'm sure. It
was fun.
It was fun. And then I was afraid of it. Then I was like, okay, now this is scary. We don't even have a plan. And so it's like, even when I'm not afraid of something, if it's something like smaller, I'm like, oh, I've done this sort of thing before, I got this. Then I find a way to like make myself uncomfortable. Because I think if you aren't uncomfortable, then, if you're comfortable, you're not really pushing as hard as you should be pushing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That tide needs to be against you for you to be swimming as hard as you possibly can.
Yeah.
But that brings us to Sentinel. What was that process like for you? Was that right after that other short with Matthew?
No, so that would have been, probably a year would have passed. And
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think I was able to, I hopped on 4 or 5 other short films, really small things, nothing big, but friends just making movies, and made one with Ryan and Grant. We made a short film. I'd done a couple music videos and really had spent, I had shot a lot that year, a lot of commercials, a lot of music videos, and then those short films. So by the time Sentinel rolled on, we shot Westworld to Yuma.
Did we shoot that before Sentinel?
Yeah, that would have been in March of 2017.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Westworld to Yuma is actually an example of not being afraid of it.
Yeah. Right.
And it was just like, yeah, we'll just do it.
Yeah.
and that's like one of my least favorite short films. I really love the first half.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
But then the second half, I mean, there's plenty of excuses to be made for it, as far as like we were out of daylight and time and we were just like, okay, just do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the first half, their face off, I really love.
Yeah, same.
But everything after that, I'm like, man, I wish we could redo the ending.
Yeah.
Because we actually didn't even do the ending, if you remember. We came up with just, okay, he'll just shoot them real quick and then it's over. There was actually a whole sequence that happened. That would have been fun. That was like this domino like effect sort of happening in a way.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, we ran out of time.
It looks great.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Great job, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know why. I thought Sentinel was the first time we worked together.
No, because Sentinel was around Thanksgiving of last year.
Did we have a plan for... Did I just wing it with Westworld to Yuma, or was there an actual shot list? I feel like there was a shot list.
I think you did make a shot list, but we ran behind. We were like 2 hours behind because of wardrobe or something.
As I do.
And then I think by 2 or 3 p.m., I think you'd thrown the shot list out at that point and said,
and it was just go time.
You just looked at me and said, just hang on. I said, okay. I'll point the camera where you tell me. We'll just do what we can.
Which was like the entirety of Sentinel.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is that like very rare for you to where it's just like, we're just going to make this up?
I mean, no. Coming from the wedding side, coming from even a lot of the commercial stuff we'd done was so bootstrapped that it wasn't like it was that foreign to me. I mean, I'm familiar with it. It's not the way now, having tasted the bigger productions, tasted the slower, more intentional timing and, the creative process, that it's not the way I really prefer to work,
No, me neither.
but it's definitely fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it always the reason I like to do it, and the reason like I like to do it with stuff like Sentinel is I think that's a really important skill to have.
Yeah.
Because eventually, no matter how good you plan, eventually that's coming in every production.
Yeah.
In my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And from, everyone that's I've ever talked to, like I have a few friends that did major features and they shot listed to a point and then they ran out of time and weren't able to shot list the rest of the film and they had no choice. They had to just,
Yeah.
So it's like, that's always been a concern of mine is like, man, I need to be comfortable just winging this. Because it just seems like that's coming. And from a DP standpoint, like you kind of need the same thing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's important to really, I think what separates good DPs from great DPs is the ability to make decisions quickly.
Yeah.
And not just to make decisions, to make great decisions quickly.
Right.
And to know when to push for things and to know when to just sit back and hang on. I think that something like Sentinel is really what it was. It just was a lot of fun. It's just 5 or 8 of us or whatever in a field just shooting. I mean, it wasn't really like, let's just, whoa, this could be cool. Let's try that. It felt like when I first got started and I just wanted to make stuff. Like I don't really, it wasn't.
And I'm always kind of talking about that. Like, it's like the further along in my career I get, it's like, how do you hold on to that and foster an atmosphere where it is still organized and it is still prepped, but you're still infusing that friends with the camera thing? Because there's so much, when you're able to do it, like it's some of my favorite stuff that ends up coming out of it. Like, this is still planned, but we're somehow finding a way to foster that environment, that electric. Because that's what was brought about by a couple buddies and a camera just making up and having fun. There's like an electricity to it.
Yeah.
And it's been kind of like a journey I'm on to try to discover how to create that. Not quite there yet, but I was able to get it like a couple times in Ballistic, like get that atmosphere going.
Well, I think a lot of that atmosphere on the bigger things happens in pre-production.
Yeah.
Where I think in pre-production you can just play and you can have fun with it and you can be a guy or 10 people or whatever in a room just having fun.
Sure. Yeah, sure. But, I mean, that fun's not necessarily going to translate to the camera. Like it has to be the most important moment of electricity for me is on set because that's, when you're creating the assets to then cut together later.
Yeah.
So it's like if you can create that in your crew to operate in that way and your cast to perform in that way, it's like that's when you get that. I keep saying electric, but
Yeah, I know what you're saying. There is a buzz. Like
it
creative
pops off
juices
the
are flowing.
screen in a way that it doesn't otherwise.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, and I think that it does translate through the lens. It translates into the image.
Yeah.
That excitement and that buzz that you're feeling. Like it's unmistakable. I'll save that since you haven't seen Mission Impossible Fallout. I'll save that. But
quiet.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so Sentinel, we'll pass right by that. And so you did a bunch of short films. You did a couple with me. Really great stuff. Really good experiences. Then we did Ballistic, right?
Yeah.
And then after Ballistic, you jumped right into your first feature.
Yeah,
Which, I mean, Chase was the DP on Ballistic. Sounds like I was saying you were the DP. I don't want to...
Yeah, no.
Sorry, Chase.
No.
So you helped out on Ballistic. Thank you, by the way.
Oh, of course.
You guys are always willing to jump in and help make things happen, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So then you helped out with that and then just jumped right into your first feature.
Yeah, so actually before Ballistic, it was in the fall of last year, I hopped on a feature with Justin from the show and a friend of mine, Brent Christie. And
okay. So you were on a feature set before Ballistic, before you got your feature.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had met my friend Brent Christie several years back on a shoot in Colorado, and I joked that I texted him every couple of months, every 2 months or something, asking if I could. He was doing DPing features, and I asked if I could come PA. I told him I'd pay my way. I'd do whatever I needed to do to get out there and work for free. I just want to be on set with him.
Yeah.
And I texted him every 2 months for 2 years, and he never had anything for me. And then Justin and I helped him shoot an interview segment for his documentary, and we went out to lunch afterwards. And he'd mentioned that he was moving back to South Carolina, and he was going to hop on this feature with Brent. And I said, well, that's great, man. Really proud of you. Excited for you. If you have an open spot, let me know. I just threw it out there. I was just kind of kidding. And he called me that night and said, hey, there's actually a camera PA spot open if you want it. And I remember I had a little bit of an internal debate of what do I do? Because I'm a DP. And I've never even AC'd before. I don't want a camera PA. Like
Not only that, you're married, you have a
I'm
production
married,
company.
exactly, all that stuff. But I think I had a little bit of an idea in my head of, is that like a backward step? Because going from what I do here as a DP, working, and at this point, working on sets that I feel I'm excited by, there's 30, 50 people on them, and going then to being the low guy on the totem pole on a feature set, I just had a little bit of reservations. And I think that was a little bit foolish. And I remember Justin saying, man, I think experience is experience. I think you just need to come out. It's not a backward step. This is an opportunity. And he was so right. I mean, I learned more on that than I have on so many of these fancy commercial shoots. Like I learned so much on that. And we had done a spot, pretty big spot for the Astros, and not to name drop, but the Astros and Budweiser right before I left for that feature. And I was the DP on that big agency, big client, all this stuff, fancy thing. Went to and shot this, as a camera PA on sort of this B movie feature, and came back and we actually did another one for the Astros and Budweiser. And the difference between the two in terms of my experience and my ability and leadership and all these things, I just took everything I learned from the feature and brought it to the second Budweiser thing, and it was 9-day difference. I mean, It made me a better DP in every way.
Man, and I think that just speaks volumes to you as a person and as a professional. Like that you're saying, it's not a backward step. Yeah, of course, it's a totally reasonable fear to have, but then to be like, no, I'll go be that lower level thing and go learn and advance myself. For me, I think that's one of the most important lessons. Like if you're listening to this and just starting out, I think that is the most important probably takeaway from this entire podcast, is just being able to do that. Just like you said, pay my own way, whatever I have to do. I will serve you coffee. I will sweep floors. Like I've said this to people too, like having that attitude, nothing will stop me. Just give me that knowledge. Like that's what will lead to success. That stuff like that is what gives me zero doubt that you will succeed everything you want to do. It's just because you have that mentality that nothing's going to stop you. Whatever wall comes up, you're going to break it down. And if you have to be a PA, you'll be a PA. And then it leads to, DPing your first feature.
Yeah, yeah. And, not having gone through film school and not really been on that many big, large, formal sets and really not paying my dues, it caught up with me. And I realized I was a little bit boastful in my, at least maybe not outwardly, but inwardly, of, I've never AC'd before. I'm a DP. I've never AC'd before. And I sort of took pride in that. And I'm embarrassed to say that because then I went and worked on this feature as a PA, and there were so many things that I didn't know. And I was ashamed that day one, I was fine. Day two, I was ashamed that I had never AC'd before or I wasn't ashamed that I'd never AC'd before. I was ashamed that I had that attitude because I realized, how can I lead my crew? How can I lead my team well if I don't even know what their job is?
Yeah.
If I don't even know how to communicate, I don't even know what they need from me. What do you need from me as a DP if you're an AC? What do I need to communicate to you? And how do I know how to do that if I've never done it before? And that was really big for me of like, wow, I had such a backwards perspective on this, and being really prideful, I think, at least internally, of I guess my experience there. And not having gone to film school, just the things that slip through the cracks, like simple things like don't put coffee or any drink on the camera cart.
Right.
That's like camera department 101.
And that's the best way to get Justin to jump you.
Exactly. And guess what? I put coffee on the camera cart and it spilled and the ACs were pissed.
Yeah.
And I will never do that again. Mm-hmm. And had I not gone through that experience, I wouldn't have learned that.
Yeah.
And that's a stupid thing. That's a small thing that I think just little things like that, being a PA, putting in your time, they really matter.
Yeah. I have like a sort of a similar thing where I've only really ever been a producer and a director, and I've been on, $1 million sets as like Ryan from Film Riot, hanging out with the producers and stuff like that. But so I never really had PA positions or lower level positions. So something popped up for me to go. I mean, I was a friend of some of the higher ups, but really the stuff that I'd be doing there was very lower level stuff. Nobody really knew me. So I went there even telling Josh, like, I want to be a peon. I want to be treated poorly to know what that feels like, if that's the case. And all of those things happen. And it was just a grueling production, a very large production for a long amount of days. I wish I could say what it was and all what happened, but I can't for all kinds of reasons. But it was just, I was treated like a peon on this thing. And I was definitely like that low level thing like you were talking about. And it was an insane experience, but it was a really great experience experience to not, because when you're like up in the producer director area, you're shielded. Like you're not really seeing all the things that are going on. And it's really important to me to be able to know the set and what's going on so I can hopefully construct an environment that's collaborative and inclusive and fun and nobody feeling like, they're garbage.
Yeah, right.
And, being able to be behind the curtain of all that and seeing the dynamics of each department working with each other and all the politics that were going on and some of the undercutting that was going on and how people were even getting things done in odd ways, working against each other to make things work for their department. It just made it's like, why is this happening? Like, I just learned so much, got yelled at one point.
Yeah.
So, so it was like, it was such a great experience, like exactly what you're talking about. It's just, I learned more just being that guy than I have on any shoot, being the director as an overall thing.
Right.
Obviously not in a story way, but as an overall thing, as far as just the set dynamic and how all that stuff worked, just being that low level thing and being able to see behind the curtain on all of it was so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in any position that you're in, or if anyone listening wants to be a leader in a position of leadership as a DP or a producer, director, whatever key position, it's so important to like find those opportunities and to spend some time doing the job of the people that you want to be leading.
Totally.
Someday.
Yeah. If you want to lead, you got to follow first.
Yeah.
Because a great leader is going to have a lot of empathy for the people that are following behind him. Because, in a lot of ways, you're working for those people.
Yeah.
I mean, they're there to help achieve what you want to achieve. But to make that happen, you got to foster an atmosphere where they feel valued. And like you said, you understand what they need from you. So
when shit hits the fan, you have to have your crew behind you.
Yeah.
They're either going to support you and say, yes, we'll go the extra mile, we'll work the extra hour, we'll go into whatever mercy so that we can get this done because you have treated us well, because you've communicated to us and we've been working. Like that relationship is so important because they will be the ones who fight for you when the time comes. And the time will come. And so it's important to, and it's not just an exchange either of, well, treat them well so they'll treat you well back. But it's also, I think, people, especially in this feature world, get treated poorly so often, and in the commercial world of just like people. So many people have
in the
egos.
Commercial world, from my experience.
Yeah, and it's a thing where it's like no one likes working like that. No one likes being in an environment.
Because like especially in the commercial world, because like in the feature world, at least we're all like coming together to tell this story, and create this thing. In the commercial world, from my experience that I've seen, it's just people punching a time card to get a paycheck.
Yeah,
which bleeds in if you do like branded content.
Right.
Like I've noticed. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see the difference between people even getting paid really well to be there versus a passion project where they're not getting paid anything.
It's weird, isn't it?
Crazy.
Yeah.
And the passion project where pretty much nobody's really getting paid anything, but everybody's there because they're so passionate to want to tell this story.
Yeah. And
it's a great atmosphere and everybody's collaborative and helping each other. Right. And then you go to the commercial shoot where it's like $1 million, $2 million thing. And everybody's getting paid very well. And it's
no one cares.
Nobody cares. Yeah. And there's like division and it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So anyway, from that feature experience in the fall of 2017, then we did Sentinel not long after that. And then I helped out as an operator on Ballistic. And then I did another short in March, I think it was. And then right after that went and hopped on again with Brent and Justin and some friends. I did 5 days on a feature in Tucson with the same production company, same team. They had done 10 days in Georgia and then 5 days in Tucson as a Western. So I hopped in the stuff for the Western. And while I was there, I had lunch with my wife came actually, and she was able to hop on the production as well. And we had lunch with the costume designer who I'd made friends with on the last movie. So we sat down, had lunch, and she said, well, my husband's a writer-director. He's actually we're self-producing our own feature this summer. And this writer-director's named Shay Sizemore. He had written the movie that we were shooting, and he'd written the movie that I had shot back in the fall, but I'd never met him. He didn't direct those because Brent had came in at that point to direct these movies. But he was a writer-director. He'd already directed a few features, but this was the first one that they were self-producing and self-funding. And I just had the thought to email him and say, hey, this is crazy, but I'm just going to throw my name in the hat. I'm this DP based in Dallas, never shot a feature. I'm really young, but it works out. I'd love to talk to you about what you have going on. And to my surprise, he emailed me back. And through a couple of conversations, he sent me the script. I remember, this might be too much detail, but I was up for a commercial job from a big New York City production company that was coming to Dallas. I was really excited about it. I was like, man, this is great. I just was pumped. And I remember it was supposed to shoot on like a Monday and a Tuesday. And I remember I got the email on like a Wednesday saying we went with somebody else. And I thought, damn, this sucks. I really wanted to do that. I was really down on myself about it.
This was the commercial?
Yeah, this is
that they went with somebody else?
Yes, yeah. And then on Sunday night, I got home late, like 11:30, and there was an email in my inbox. It was from Shay, and he said, here's the script. We hadn't really talked. We hadn't really connected. He said, here's the script. Maybe give it a read. I know it's a lot to ask, but I would love to talk to you about it later this week if we can connect. And I remember
you read it like that night.
Oh yeah, I mean, I turned to my wife and said, I'm really sorry. Like, go ahead and go to bed. Like, I can't sleep knowing that there's a script in my inbox. So I stayed up till probably 3 a.m. reading the thing, and then since it was fresh, I wanted to just get my thoughts out there. So I wrote down what resonated with me, and I sort of threw together a quick like lookbook and a mood board. And I sent him an email and just said, hey, I'm ready when you are.
Dude, I'd hire you. If that was in my inbox next day, I'm like, sold.
So he, probably like 9 a.m. that morning, I get an email from him saying, are you serious? Like, you want to talk like now? And so he called me, and it was the first time we had talked on the phone. And within 5-10 minutes, we were deep in the script. We were like way in it. And it just I felt like I was really, really impressed with the script, and I loved what he'd done with it and where he was taking it. And the next day, he offered me this spot. So that's kind of how all that transpired, and yeah.
I'm going to pause right there so we can again thank our sponsor, Westcott, who's the industry-leading lighting manufacturer that specializes in lighting and light control for filmmakers around the world. They are the originators of the flexible LED system, the Icelight 2, Scrim Gym Sin, and Fast Flags. Westcott continues to develop new products with the expectation of durability, portability, and high-end results, whether you're just getting into filmmaking or continuously on sets of feature films. Westcott has and will continue to be there for you and all of your lighting needs. So again, jump over to our episode page for this episode to get more info on all of that. But now back into it with Daniel. Jumping on to your like first feature versus you had done a handful of shorts. What was the big difference for you as a DP on a feature versus a shorts? Because it was still really low budget, right?
Yeah.
So still trying to do a lot with a little. And how many days you told me? But it was like crazy, right?
Yeah. So the movie's called Bygone Billy. We shot for 12 days.
How many pages?
94 pages.
Oh my God.
And
how many locations?
So that's the good thing. The first 7 days were in one location.
Okay.
The last 5 days were all in different locations. But
dude, Ballistic was 7 days, and I complain about that. That is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
How many hours a day were you shooting? 16?
No, 12.
Really?
Yep.
What in the world?
Or 12 or less.
Was there like, did you just minimize the coverage like crazy?
That was a lot of it. Yeah, that was a lot of it. And also, thankfully, he's a 2-take director. I mean, it's like 2 or 3 takes unless he's not getting what he wants. I mean, I think the most we did was maybe 9, and that was like the day we had the Steadicam.
Okay.
So it's like, that helped a lot. That's just the way he works.
Was there a lot of handheld?
No handheld.
Really?
None.
Did you have dolly?
We had a Dana dolly. We had sticks and a Dana dolly and a Steadicam for the last 2 days, which I loved because I have a lot of experience with handheld. I feel really comfortable with handheld, and I don't have a lot of experience, especially with narrative stuff, just locked off.
I feel like that's why I always lock off Booth.
Yeah.
Is because like he goes handheld a lot, and I'm like, what happens if I lock you off?
Yeah. Man, I feel like it's such a, it's a challenge. And handheld is so easy because you can just move and you can, find your shot. You can just shop it around so much. But with sticks, you have to communicate to your team. You have to know where you want the placement, and once you're there, you should be there. And that definitely was a difference. But yeah, so we shot for 12 days, 7 days in one location, 5 days in other locations. So we averaged probably 8 pages a day.
That's crazy.
Our biggest day was a 14.5 page day that we did. I think we knocked it down to like 12.5.
Was it just like mostly dialogue? Was there any action or anything like that?
There was some action. It was mostly dialogue, but there definitely was a little bit of action, especially in like the last few days. But yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's hardcore, dude.
Pretty aggressive. And I think the budget, I hope it's okay to say the budget was like $55,000. So
what? Good God.
Yeah. So
I'm not allowed to complain about
So
ballistic anymore.
in some ways, it was a great first feature for me to hop on. And the nice part is, Shay and I clicked immediately. I mean, we just like were immediate like brothers, friends. One of those things where it just makes sense. But also, almost all the crew that worked on this movie, I knew. I'd known from working on these other features, and all the crew worked for free, and I didn't have very much money for gear. I mean, I think we had 5 lights or something, 5 main lights, I should say, and then a couple quasars and things like that.
What'd you shoot on?
We shot on an Alexa Mini.
Okay.
Which thankfully I'm very spoiled, and our production company owns an Alexa Mini, so I was able to work it out to get that there. And we were on Zeiss Super Speeds for the lenses. But going back to what you were saying about having people who are paid versus people who are there for free, the difference that makes in the crew's investment in it was so evident in this, where everyone really believed in the project, because everybody who was there, they were there to make the thing. Yeah. They weren't there to get a paycheck. And we basically ended up with 8 people on the crew. We had an 8-person crew. No G&E team. We had a full camera department and no G&E team. We had 1 sound person. The costume designer was also the main producer and also handled all the crafty and all the food. And we just made it work.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I expected to like maybe 60% of what we shot. And I think I'm probably at about 85%. I'm really happy with what we shot, and I'm so surprised to be able to say that. So,
what were some of your main takeaways? Like, what are some of the main things that you learned from DPing your first feature? Anything that like surprised you that you were like, oh, wow, this?
Yeah. Let me see. I wrote some stuff down.
He's pulling out his phone. He's looking at his notepad on his phone.
I try to write it all down.
Yeah. That's interesting. I never do. And then people ask me like, hey, what'd you learn from your last project? I'm like, I learned a lot. Can we settle on that?
I mean, so there's a lot of things that I learned that some are really broad and some are really hyper specific. I think one of the biggest things I learned was there's no reason why you can't make your thing. Like Justin Robinson, for example, he saves all his money from at least as much as he can from working on the things he works on as an AC or whatever, and then he goes and makes this thing. And he doesn't wait for anybody to ask him to make the thing. He just makes it. And so there's really no excuse why, like if somebody wants to make a feature, we made a feature with $50,000 in 12 days with 8 people on the crew. And I think it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah.
It's like, it's possible. And no, that's not how we want to work every time, but we did it. And I think that's a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think people get wrapped up with like gear a lot too. Like that's one of the reasons I wanted to shoot ballistic on the C200. I mean, other than the fact that I reviewed it, I really dug it, and then Canon was down to come in and help us make the whole thing happen. But I just love the idea of shooting on, a sub $10,000 camera for a project like that. It's just like, people thinking they need more than an iPhone when they don't have it. Like if you have an iPhone, great, go shoot the thing. Like, even trying to get a feature, like a studio exec is not going to care if that was shot on an Alexa or an iPhone if it works. So I'm just always like, the content is king. Like, how was your pacing? Were you able to give the audience an experience? Were you able to convey what you wanted to convey? That's what you need to be showing and pulling the experience of. So yeah, man, I agree with that 100%. I mean, we shot Sentinel for sandwiches.
Yeah, right.
That was the entirety of the budget. We got sandwiches.
And it was so much fun.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Yeah, and I think going back to some of the other things, I learned so much, it's hard to like keep track of what I learned. I think one of the biggest things was just like balancing all of the challenges. That was probably, if I could categorize my experience there with one word, it'd just be balancing. Just balance. I mean, it was like you have little money, almost no crew, 94 pages to get through, and 12 days to do it. It's like, how do you do that? How do you make that work? Insane. And I essentially was my own gear producer, so I had to source everything and know what I wanted, and I had to rent it and find it and do all that stuff.
Did you pre-light it all?
Not really. No, we couldn't really. The biggest thing we did was practicals. So I talked to the production designer. Thankfully, we had a production designer, and he was huge. I mean, having him there was huge. And I said what I always say: you can't have too many practicals. There's no such thing. If there's one too many, we'll pull it out. But I want more than you think we need. And he went out and bought. And we must have had 15 lamps.
The most lamps of any house.
We had this PA that was supposed to be there the whole time. He came on the prep day and spent an entire 8-hour day building lamps, and he never showed up after that. He was done.
He hates the production and IKEA forever.
Exactly. But thank you, Jack, wherever you are. It saved us. So
if you're hearing this, Jack, thank you.
So yeah, I mean, that was probably the biggest challenge.
Did you have a gaffer?
Nope.
Really? So were you your own gaffer, or was there somebody just wearing like two hats for that?
Essentially, the camera department was doing double duty. They were sort of the camera department and the G&E team, and I was my own gaffer in that sense. And so I'm eternally grateful for them because they just killed it. I mean, they just absolutely were the best, and were super on it. And there were never any moments when I felt like anybody was being lazy or I didn't have the help that I needed. I mean, I felt so supported the whole time, and I think that's a huge testament to those guys, and just having like a team that really believes in the project and believes in the people behind it. And I mean, there's no way we could have done it without them.
What was prep like for this? Because I imagine that many pages in 12 days. Prep was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, so when I initially got offered the project, I was really excited. And I remember I actually had a conversation with my friend Brent and asked him, am I ready? And he told me a story about how he was a Best Boy Electric on this big movie with 50 Cent and Bruce Willis and all these big name actors. And it was like the morning of the first day, the gaffer got sick. And the DP came up to him and said, Brent, I want you to gaff my movie. And he said, are you ready? And at that point, Brent's like, you can't say no. You can't say no to that. You have to just say yes and do your best. And he told me that, and what he was saying was, you can't say no. You have to just say yes. No, you're not ready, but you can't say no.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I didn't, because and going back to what we were talking about being scared, I really wasn't that scared until I saw the schedule.
Right.
That was the first moment I got nervous, was when I saw the schedule and thought, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? There is so much to get through. And we were jumping around so much. I mean, it wasn't even between scenes. I mean, it just was all over the place. And so that was when I started to get nervous. But the biggest thing I did was I made sure that I knew the script as well as Shay did. So I read through it one time that first night, made my notes, and then I read through it a second time. And then I did a third pass where I used Seth's plot devices, the story clock, and I clocked out the script so that I knew the beats and I understood what was happening. And through that, I discovered all of Act 2 takes place inside the house, and then Act 1 and 3 are the other locations. That just helped me compartmentalize, especially as we're jumping around so much. I needed to be sure that I knew every time we move on from a setup where we are in the story for this next setup, and then where that fits in with where we were before and where we're going after.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that was the biggest thing. And I just looked at a lot of references. I built a mood board, and essentially Shay and I bounced a few ideas off of each other, and he's not a very visual director. So on the day, he didn't really have a lot of input as far as the visuals. So I really just got to play.
Did you shot list it, or you just kind of saw the scene and then pieced it together?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I made my own shot list. He made his shot list. The intention was to combine them, but we got too wrapped up in prep, too busy. So basically what we did is every night before the next day of shooting, I threw my shot list out. I didn't use it at that point, and he threw his out. I would reference it here or there, but basically every night before the next day, I'd take Artemis on my phone and we would shoot basically our angles. We would block it out, just him and I, or we'd pull in. Our location was also where we were staying. So sometimes we'd pull in a few crew people.
It's like American Made.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And we would pull people in and basically have our boards for the next day, and we'd print those out and have those for the next day. That was sort of our workflow there, and that really helped us because we just couldn't move quickly like that without it. Otherwise, we would have been guessing.
How much of the script did you have to cut, or did you shoot the entire script?
We shot the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
With the exception, there are probably 5, maybe 10 pages of second unit stuff that we'll do probably late August.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it's like establishing stuff of houses. It's, just mostly just what you think of as second unit B-roll kind of thing.
So you just pluck a scene out of the thing.
Yeah.
You have the scene, you're coming into it. What's first up? Are you watching the blocking first before you do anything? Or are you starting to piece out the scene first with like second team? How's that working for you to get into a scene? There
wasn't a second team. So a lot of it was, we had blocked it out the night before. And so I kind of, what was interesting about the way Shay works is that he's a very collaborative director in the sense that he wrote the thing and he's directing it, and he has an idea in his head of what he wants. But then when the time comes, he will, like, if, for example, on the first day, we had a scene in the bathroom where we blocked out this whole thing. There was supposed to be this dialogue thing. The guy comes home, he talks to his wife, and they're kind of in the bathroom. They have this exchange, and we blocked it out. But when we went to I think we did a blocking rehearsal and the actors completely changed the blocking. He didn't tell them, here's the blocking. He wanted to see how they would do it. And we watched their blocking and that's what we shot. I mean, in his mind, it's not that his job was over, but they're the ones who should decide the blocking in a lot of ways. And I thought that was really interesting because it definitely was a challenge for us shooting-wise, because sometimes we'd have an idea in our head of what they were going to do, but he really gave them the space to explore their own ideas and to be creative and really to own their characters, and he didn't try to force those things on them in a way that like I haven't seen a lot. And it just made for a very cool, very collaborative environment.
That's great.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does. How are you diving into coverage at that point? Like, are you making a plan based on what are you seeing, or are you just like, all right, well, we'll go here first and then see what plays out?
No, I think make a plan based on what we're seeing. I mean, we know what we need for the scene. We've talked it out. We've both done our shot list, and so I think, and I did my shot list knowing I was going to throw it away because it just putting myself in the scene, even if it's just in my mind's eye, it helped me sort of get those ideas of coverage out, at least just out of my head and onto paper to where I took that on subconsciously, or I like absorbed that subconsciously. So on the day when the time came, I knew what we needed without having to reference the shot list, if that makes sense. And he was similar.
Yeah. And did you shoot a lot of day and night stuff, or was it more night? Because I remember seeing like just on your Instagram a lot of night stuff.
I think it probably was, I would guess it probably 60% night, 40% day.
What did you find? Because you are working with limited resources. So what did you find more difficult, daytime or nighttime?
I think I typically find daytime to be more difficult when you're working with limited resources, because nighttime you have
because you couldn't really ND windows or anything.
Right, exactly. Whereas with nighttime, you basically like you have a clean slate, you have a blank canvas to start adding things in. Whereas daytime, there's a lot you have to do to contend with the light. And of course, keeping consistency across days when it's supposed to be the same scene, it's like you have to just balancing all those things. And we didn't have an HMI. We didn't have, the biggest thing we had two 300Ds, aperture 300Ds. Yeah. And those saved us, but like those are our most powerful lamps.
Wow.
So I had to use the daylight as much as I could. And it's just difficult.
Was that all interior or was that outside?
I'd say it mostly was interiors. Yeah.
That's helpful at least.
Definitely.
Outside with the sun moving is just freaking worst.
Yeah. And it kind of saved us, but it also was a real pain. Was the house that we were shooting in for most of it was in the shade. But it was in the shade from these big leafy trees that cast a terrible green cast over the whole house. And that became a real problem because I really had to work to balance that out. And then the house was a nightmare for me because it was like super uneven. All the ground outside, basically like the upstairs, it's a 2-bedroom house, but the upstairs is like 3 stories up because of the way that the house is built on this hill. So I couldn't get lights up there. I mean, we had one Mambo combo stand and one combo stand. I can't get a lamp that high. And so there's certain times when I just had to build a book light in the room and hide it in the corner and do what we can to make our own windows because I can't get a light up there. And it's in the shade, so nothing's coming in. The natural light's terrible. Because my plan was, we'll just use all natural light for a lot of this stuff. And I got in there, I was like, no. I can't. You just can't. I mean, the natural light that's there is terrible and it's disgustingly green. So it's like I have to do something. I can't get a light up that high outside the window. So we just had to make one. So it was a challenge. Definitely was. Yeah, it was tough. But it was such a refreshing experience for me coming from having spent so much time in commercials. Because it felt, and even from short films, because it felt like for the first time we can tell the story. We have the time to explore these ideas, and not the time in the schedule, but the time in the story to explore this character or explore this idea. It just was so refreshing in that sense. And I definitely caught the creative bug of like, this is fulfilling. I mean, there's just something about it. I was telling my wife, is like, this is the first time I felt like what I'm doing matters. It's
like this baby and you raised it and now you're sending it off into the world. There's such an accomplished feeling from it. Yeah. And then when people dig it and they respond to it and they understand what you were trying to do and they, you were able to gift them that experience, just, there's nothing better.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's nothing worse when there's people that don't like it. And
sure.
It hurts
but at least if you like it, then at least there's that. I mean, with commercials, it's like you just make the thing and you're done and no one cares and it doesn't matter.
Oh,
and,
sure.
It's like
client work.
And I mean, tough. You can be proud of it, but in a year, I mean.
Yeah, you can be technically proud of it, but it's like, it's never a part of you. Like when you do a creative work, it's literally a part of you. You're putting a piece of you in it.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I really did with this, knowing it's a pretty emotional story. I mean, it's kind of a family drama about a husband and wife that have some issues, and the husband has a lot of skeletons in his closet. And so it deals with, I mean, there's like one day we spent a 12-hour day of them just screaming at each other, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But my experience from the music background was I can't write a good piece of music unless I really put myself in it, unless I really dive in emotionally. And I have not really had that experience as a DP until this, where I'm like, this is something that I have to even have my own little routine that I do to put myself in it emotionally, because I knew that that was going to translate through the image. And I mean, I would step outside and I would do my own little like just mental preparation for the scene, emotional preparation for the scene, and go in. I mean, like there were times I cried behind the lens.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
for sure.
You know,
I cried a bunch during Ballistic even.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Tell was like the darkest thing I ever did, but even back then it was like, especially as a director, you have to be in the same mode as what's happening in front of the lens. Otherwise, you're not going to feel the thing you want the audience to feel, and you're not feeling the thing the actor feels. At least that's the way that it happens for me. So like after Tell, I was like, I never want to make another dark horror film again.
Yeah.
And then like 2 months later, I recuperated. I'm like,
right.
I'm ready for another horror film.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, Ballistic had some like more heavy moments and whatnot, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like the same thing. So I could imagine an entire day of that level of drama would be, that'd be exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's about infidelity and
Yeah, that's tough,
murder,
man.
and it's like, ooh, it just...
And it's weird because you're not like, obviously you're not like literally going to the place, but in a way you are. Like you're taking on the emotions and sort of mental state
Yeah.
of that situation, and it is kind of taxing, which is odd. It's a very interesting thing for sure.
Yeah. And the actors, Shay smartly put all the money that we did have into great actors and good food for the crew. And the actors
That's
just...
key. Food is key.
It's huge. I mean, yeah, massive. But the actors were phenomenal, and they just brought it. I mean, some of the best actors I think I've definitely ever worked with, and some of the best I've ever seen even. I couldn't believe that some of the level that they brought to it, and I think the level of artisanship that they brought to the table is amazing.
That's great, man.
So, yeah.
What's one thing that like you wish you would have known before going into the film? Or was it more like, I mean, obviously there's all these little things because, so for me, I'll say for me, for Ballistic, I don't have one. I learned a ton of all these little nuanced things that sort of evolved over time. And it's like, oh, okay, it's a little more helpful for me to do this for this specific type of actor, or I realized working with the crew in this way, or the dynamic in this way, or a big portion of it was just like, I can do it, a crew this large, I can run this. But there wasn't like a big before and after thing. It's more like the collection of all my experiences led me to be able to accomplish the thing that we just accomplished, which is a totally fine answer and true. It's kind of like what you were saying before, where it's like you don't realize all the, like, I remember when I kind of ninja'd Josh into like editing and content creation because he was very insecure about it really early on, like when we lived in Florida. But I saw like, no, this is who you are, dude. Like, you're a content creator. You could definitely like edit, because that's all about pacing and understanding comedy for like a lot of stuff that we were doing. And no, I can't do that. I can't do that. So I kind of just like ninja'd him into just one day. I just like tossed that. Okay, now do this. After all these tiny little things I had him doing. And then he did it and was just shocked at how much stuff he knew. And he's like, oh, I was able to do that. Yeah. So was it a little bit more like that? Or do you have something that's kind of like a big, like, before I didn't know this, now I do? I mean, I think what you're saying, everything that I'd done up until that point prepared me. I felt very prepared. Yeah. And not in the sense of like, oh, I prepped for this. I mean, that all my experiences leading up to it have prepared me for this. And I was surprised that I felt as good as I did, and that we were as prepared as we were. I was as prepared as I was. But I think the biggest thing was that I'm a storyteller, and as cliche as that sounds, it was a newer discovery for me, as coming from all these experiences that I've had in the past. It felt so, I don't know, it just felt right. Right. I don't know. It just felt like, man, this is what I want to do. You could be romantic about it. This is where I want to be. This is where I want to go. I mean, this is the Which isn't the case with everyone. It's not like if anyone does this, they're going to be like, oh, this is it. Yeah. It's really, really freaking hard.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like there's a lot of people who do it and they're like, you know what? Rather not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I got more than 5 hours of sleep probably for the 3 weeks.
That's a lot. That's impressive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And I lost 10 pounds, and I mean, it was tough. It was tough for sure. I think we probably did 18 hours a day of work. So we'd shoot for 12 and prep for 6, and it was tough. And I remember, it's funny because I remember being there and really enjoying what I was doing, but like I want to go home. Like I'm having fun, but like I kind of want to go home. And then I got home and I was like, I want to go back. I want to do more. I mean, I of course didn't want to be away, but I definitely was like, I want to get back out there.
Yeah, there is that funny thing that happens where you have moments of like, oh, I don't want to do this today.
Yeah.
Like headed towards sets, just the pressure's kind of weighing on you and you're like, not today, not today. Then you get there, monitors up, and you're like, I never want to stop doing this.
Yeah, right.
This right here, this is where I belong, right here for forever. I never want to go home. And then you wrap, and then you sleep, and then the next day you're like, not today.
Yeah. And I think this was for me, like, it was the first real exercise in, not exercise, because short films are that, but telling the story visually, this was the first time where I really got to stretch. Yeah. And I really got to, like, flex my whatever creative muscles. And it's not an action movie. It's not all these things. It's just heavy dialogue drama. And so doing something that is telling a story that way visually that I like and that I want to see. I mean,
well, you get to be so much more intentional.
Exactly.
Like you can be with action, but not really on low budget. Like on low budget, it's more like getting it done. Yeah. When you get to like that sort of stuff, even on low budget, you get to be so much more intentional because it's, you know, it has to be.
Because even developing the look, I mean, I very intentionally separated it out. There's a lot of flashbacks. And the present day is sort of divided between things that are okay, and then underneath the surface, there's all this stuff that's sort of festering and brewing. And so I sort of separated those out into different looks. As far as like the flashbacks are very blue, have like a very cool color, and they really represent him as a different person than this lead character. Whereas the present day stuff that's good is really neutral and clean, and it looks really like the whites are white. And then the present day stuff that's bad, a lot of their huge fights, a lot of like the violence, not the violence, but there's a little bit of like, it gets a little rough. I went like really, really warm. And I really loved that idea of separating these things out and telling the story in a way that you really create a space for the story to sort of like to exist in within those colors or within whatever look or whatever it is. I think that was my first time to really have the time and the space to explore ideas like that and to explore telling a story visually in that way.
That's awesome.
That was really cool. At least doing it in a way that I wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So what's next? You wrapped your first feature. Do you have something else lined up, or it's kind of just like, doing the production company thing and working towards the next thing?
It's funny you asked that. So 2 days after I got back, I had planned on taking a week off, spending time with my wife, just recuperating. And there was definitely some conversations that we had of like, what we talked about going into this was, I'm going to go do this and see if this is what I want, if this is what we want.
Right.
And I went, did it, came back.
Yeah, because they need to be on board too. Man.
Absolutely.
It's like,
absolutely.
They're a part of the career more because they're accepting the madness.
Yeah, especially if we want to have kids. I mean, we do want to have kids, so that's a big factor. And so I got home, and that was the plan, was we were going to have these conversations over this next week. Well, 2 days after I got home, I got a call about doing another one. And different group, different director, different writer. And I thought, oh man. I mean, I was ready to turn it down. I was like, I just think no. Because it was shooting late August. It was only a month away. And we talked about it some more, and I did a little bit of my own prep on it just behind the scenes, and really felt like, you know what? I think this might be worth it. And so I said yes to it, just in faith that it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then a couple weeks after that, it fell through, or at least they're pushing the dates. And so for now, I don't really have a lot going on, which is weird for me. I mean, like you and I were texting the other day of like, we always want to be working on the next thing. We're always looking to the next thing. And right now it's just, I'm back home. I'm really working on the company, production company stuff. But for right now, that's it. And I've been in this weird mode where I've been really down about it. I've like been really...
Dude, depression So I finally took a vacation for the first time since like my honeymoon, because it's always like we go places and I was like, I would always be, because my wife would be like, we haven't taken a vacation since our honeymoon. I'm like, what are you talking about? We went to Australia. And she's like, you were working. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I took you to California. You were working. I'm like, oh yeah. So it's like, it's only been work trips.
Yeah.
And I hadn't, so it was like, I don't even know, 7 years. And I was like, all right, I should probably, but I was like burning out hard. And I was just like, it's like my brain broke and I was like, okay, enough. And I just booked this like California vacation and we went for like, I don't even remember, like 8-9 days or something like that. And I got back expecting to be, you know, refueled, ready to go. Like I feel good, because it was like you said, I was super down. I was feeling like pretty much depressed, just like fed up with everything. Like I don't want to do any of this anymore. And
you're saying exactly what's been going through my head,
dude.
Yeah.
But so then I come back from this vacation and I was like, oh, I was just really burnt out because I was working crazy hours and so much stress. And I come back and it's like, you know, it was a nice vacation, but I feel the same.
Yeah.
Like I'm sick of everything. I feel depressed. I was like, what is happening? And then I started prepping, I think it was Sentinel. All of it went away. And we did Sentinel and I felt great. And Sentinel went right into Ballistic and I felt great.
Yeah.
And during Ballistic, I started prepping some other stuff that you know about and I felt really great. And it's just like, I have the next thing that I'm working on, the next experience that I want to give, the next story that I want to tell. And then all of a sudden it's like, that's my vacation.
Yeah.
It's like when you don't have that, there's this part of you missing that needs to be filled. And you know what I mean? I think that that seems to be what's going on, is there's like this piece of me that aspect of my life fills.
Yeah.
And if it's not there to fill it, there's like this thing missing that leads to being depressed and being over everything and just like, that's my vacation.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's funny too, because I knew that, oh, I'm going to shoot this thing and no one is going to care. No one is going to call me. Like, just because I've done a feature doesn't mean that people are, all of a sudden my phone's going to be ringing off the hook. I knew that. And for some reason, you know, it's like, it's not about getting calls. It's about just doing stuff. You're just like, I just want to be doing something.
Make the next thing.
I want to be making something.
Tell
I want
the
to be
next
working
story.
on something.
Craft
yeah, exactly.
the next, you know, thing.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's like a disease or
I think it is. I think it is.
Filmmaking is a disease.
But there's no cure, man.
No, there's not.
You have it. You have the bug now. You're screwed.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I try to like, it might be like easier for me because I'm a writer director.
Yeah.
So I can just always be prepping something.
Yeah.
So that's been really helping. Like once I realized that, like, oh, doing Sentinel was therapy.
Yeah.
And I'm good now. Like once I realized that, I've just always been developing. So I have like, I think I posted it out the other day. It's like I'm writing 5 treatments at once.
Yeah.
Just because my brain also just works that way. Like if I focus only on one thing, I like start to lose focus. But if I have several things that I'm doing, I have my main one that I'm focusing on. And then if I need to take a little vacation from it, then I'll develop something else for a second. But just always having something that I'm developing, even if it's not happening, you know, whatever. I just have it in my pocket now that I can pull out, which has been useful recently. You know, it's at least crafting that. So I don't know how you would be able to take and run with that. I mean, unless prepping non-existent films or something, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's watching a lot of movies. I've been watching a lot of movies, and I mean, I don't consider myself, at least not right now, a director or writer or anything like that, but definitely like ideas start coming in. I'm like, well, maybe that'd be fun. Like maybe I should try one. Yeah. Why not? I don't have anything else going on.
Do you think you might want to write and direct?
I don't know. I think so, probably, but we'll see. I mean, for now, I love DPing.
Yeah.
And being a DP is a weird thing because your entire job, in every aspect, whether it's on the screen or off the screen, your entire job is making other people look good.
Right.
That's all you do. That's all. I mean, at the end of the day, that's your only job. You make your actors look good. You make your director look good. You make your crew look good. I mean, that's all you do. And so it's really, really fulfilling. But there is always a little bit of me that's like, but there's this other thing. Right. It's like I could be creating something from like within or whatever, you know, it's super cheesy, but I could be doing something for me.
Right.
And that sounds selfish.
Like that would be like specifically your vision, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And that idea is definitely like, I've never made a short of my own. I have done a little bit of doc stuff for myself, but never anything serious. Yeah. And so that I'm definitely intrigued by that.
So has that kind of been growing more and more, or is that just something in the back of your head that you're just like, maybe?
I think it's something that's in the back of my head that's like, maybe, that is growing a little bit.
Right.
But I really, really love DPing, and I really want to continue to do that for the next few years and just dive in. I mean, I really want to do more narrative stuff. I love that so much. for me, creating images is just one of the most like fulfilling things, and working with the team and really like just lighting something really well. I can't get enough of it.
Yeah,
you
for
know?
sure. Well, I have no doubt that you'll be successful.
Yeah.
So
well,
we'll be
thank you.
seeing a lot more badass stuff from you in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I'll try.
All right. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
So that's it for today. To connect with Daniel online, go to filmriot.com/podcast. Go to the episode page for this episode, and you'll find all of his stuff there. You can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Ryan_Conley. If you dug this episode and other episodes that we've put up, jump over to iTunes, rate it, and leave a review. Share it with your friends. That stuff helps us out a lot. Until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.